Son abandons sick father to make money, and when he decides to return, he receives an unexpected surprise. Please consider subscribing to the channel to support our projects. John, a 25-year-old young man, grew up on the bustling streets of New York, where life always seemed to move at a frenetic pace. He and his father, Henry, shared a deep bond, especially after the premature death of John's mother. The loss had been a devastating blow for both of them, but it also brought them closer in a way few could understand. Henry had become both father and mother, working tirelessly to support the small family and give John a decent life. Henry was a man with a generous heart, always willing to help the neighbors and known for his community spirit. He worked as a carpenter, and his calloused hands were proof of years of hard labor. John, still a teenager, used to accompany his father on weekends, learning the trade and valuing Henry's effort and dedication. The carpentry workshop had become a sacred place for them, where, amid the sawdust and tools, they shared stories and dreams. Their relationship strengthened over the years, especially during difficult moments. Henry's illness came suddenly, a degenerative condition that weakened him day by day. John, then in his early 20s, took on the role of caregiver. He managed the household, did the shopping, and took Henry to medical appointments. The nights were long, filled with silent worries and plans on how to improve his father's quality of life. John worked at a local restaurant, doing what he could to cover the increasing medical expenses. Despite the hardships, he never complained. Henry's smile, even on the most painful days, was what kept John motivated. They still sat together at the kitchen table, reminiscing about the old times and dreaming of a better future. He was a determined and hopeful young man who saw hard work as a means to provide a more comfortable life for himself and his father. However, the weight of responsibilities and Henry's increasing frailty made the situation more and more unsustainable. It was in this setting of love, sacrifice, and daily struggle that John began to feel the pressure to find a more lasting solution to their problems. One day, John received an unexpected call. It was a job offer, but the only problem was that it would be in Los Angeles. It was a great opportunity with an excellent salary. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on John's shoulders. The job offer in Los Angeles was a golden opportunity, promising not only financial stability but also a chance to truly change his and Henry's lives. However, the prospect of leaving his sick father alone filled him with an overwhelming sense of guilt and fear. Henry, who had always been his rock, now needed constant care and support. Every night, John sat by Henry's bedside, watching the frail man who had once been so strong. He saw the pain etched on his father's face and heard the labored breaths that grew weaker with each passing day. The idea of leaving Henry in this vulnerable state felt almost unbearable. Yet, John also knew that without a significant increase in income, he would never be able to afford the medical treatments and care that Henry desperately needed. Conflicted and tormented, John spent countless hours weighing his options. He talked to doctors, friends, and neighbors, seeking advice and hoping for a solution that wouldn't force him to make such a heart-wrenching choice. But every conversation led back to the same point. He needed more money to give his father the best chance at recovery. Finally, with a heavy heart, John made his decision. He would take the job in Los Angeles, believing that the long-term benefits would outweigh the immediate pain of separation. The night before his departure, John sat with Henry, explaining his decision and promising to return with the means to provide better care. Henry, despite his weakened state, understood and supported his son's choice, urging him to seize the opportunity. With tears in his eyes and a deep sense of sorrow, John packed his bags. He made arrangements for a neighbor to check on Henry daily and hired a part-time nurse to assist with his father's needs. As he boarded the plane to Los Angeles, John's mind was filled with a mixture of hope and heartache, knowing that his departure was both an act of love and a leap of faith. In Los Angeles, John's career took off with a speed that surprised even him. His knack for innovative solutions and his relentless work ethic quickly earned him the respect and admiration of his colleagues and superiors. Promotions came swiftly, along with substantial raises and bonuses. John found himself in a position he had only dreamed of, where financial worries were a thing of the past. He moved into a sleek, modern apartment with a panoramic view of the city and treated himself to a luxury car, a symbol of his newfound success. Los Angeles dazzled John with its endless possibilities. The city's vibrant energy and the allure of high society drew him in. He attended glamorous parties, networked with influential figures, and dined at the finest restaurants. It was a life far removed from the struggles and modest existence he had known in New York. Yet, amidst the glitter and glamour, a persistent sense of guilt gnawed at him. Henry's image haunted John's thoughts, a constant reminder of the sacrifice he had made. The early days in Los Angeles were marked by regular phone calls home. John would anxiously dial Henry's number, eager to hear his father's voice and reassure himself that everything was all right. Their conversations, filled with updates and shared memories, were a lifeline that kept John grounded. However, as John's responsibilities grew, the demands of his career began to consume more of his time and energy. Late nights at the office, business trips, and social obligations started to take precedence. The calls home became less frequent, and John found himself making excuses to delay them. Each missed call weighed heavily on his conscience, but he justified it by telling himself that his success was for Henry's benefit. John's new lifestyle was intoxicating. He found solace in the bustling nightlife of Los Angeles, losing himself in the excitement and distractions the city offered. The more he immersed himself in his work and social life, the easier it became to push thoughts of home to the back of his mind. Yet, the guilt was a constant companion, casting a shadow over his accomplishments. The moments of triumph felt incomplete, tinged with the pain of knowing that his father was alone and suffering. Despite his attempts to enjoy his success, John couldn't escape the feeling that he was betraying Henry. He attended lavish events and mingled with celebrities, but the joy was fleeting. At night, when the city quieted and he was left alone with his thoughts, the reality of his situation would hit him hard. The silence of his apartment contrasted sharply with the noise of his conscience, reminding him of the promises he had made. John's inner conflict grew as time went on. The pressure of maintaining his upward trajectory at work while grappling with his guilt became a heavy burden. He started to avoid phone calls altogether, fearing the inevitable pang of regret each conversation would bring. Friends and colleagues noticed a change in him. The once enthusiastic and driven young man now carried an air of melancholy. John's success in Los Angeles was undeniable, but it came at a personal cost. The more he achieved, the more he felt the weight of his decision to leave Henry behind. The luxurious lifestyle that had once thrilled him now seemed empty, a stark contrast to the love and connection he had abandoned. Each day was a battle to reconcile his ambitions with the growing void in his heart, a struggle that left him feeling more isolated and lost in the midst of his triumphs. Henry's health took a sharp decline. The illness that had gradually weakened him now seemed to accelerate its cruel progress. His once occasional pain became a constant companion, and the simple tasks he used to manage became insurmountable challenges. Henry, who had always been robust and self-sufficient, found himself increasingly dependent on the kindness of neighbors and friends. The community rallied around Henry as best they could. Mrs. Thompson from next door would bring over home-cooked meals and sit with him, offering the company he so desperately needed. Mr. Alvarez, an old friend, made a point to check on Henry every evening, ensuring he had everything he needed. Yet, despite their efforts, a gaping void remained that only John could fill. Henry's nights were the hardest. Alone in the quiet apartment, he would lie awake, his thoughts drifting to John and the memories they shared. The walls, once filled with laughter and conversation, now echoed with silence. The loneliness gnawed at him, a heavy weight that exacerbated his physical ailments. He missed John terribly, not just for the care he provided but for the bond they shared. The pain of separation took its toll on Henry's spirit as much as on his body. He tried to stay optimistic, believing in John's promise to return and bring better days with him. But as weeks turned into months, that hope began to wane. The intermittent phone calls, though cherished, were not enough to stave off the growing sense of abandonment and despair. Henry's frailty became more pronounced with each passing day. His movements grew slower, and he often felt too weak to leave his bed. The local doctor, despite his best efforts, could do little more than manage Henry's symptoms, providing temporary relief but no cure. The neighbors, though compassionate, could not offer the same level of personal care and emotional support that John had provided. The solitude was relentless. Henry's once sharp mind began to fog, clouded by the pain and isolation. He spent hours staring out the window, watching the world move on without him. The sadness he felt was a deep, aching void, made worse by the physical discomfort that plagued him. He longed for the sound of John's voice, the comfort of his presence, and the reassurance that everything would be all right. Despite the community's best efforts, they couldn't replace the essential connection that Henry had lost. The emotional and physical strain of being separated from his son accelerated his decline, leading to a deterioration that seemed as inevitable as it was heartbreaking. The love and care of his neighbors, though sincere, were mere patches on a wound that only John's return could heal. One evening, as John was wrapping up another long day at work, his phone rang. The number was familiar but unexpected. It was Mr. Alvarez, an old family friend. John answered, his heart immediately sinking at the tone of Mr. Alvarez's voice. With a heavy sigh, Mr. Alvarez informed him that Henry's condition had worsened dramatically. The local doctor had done all he could, but Henry was now in a critical state. The news hit John like a sledgehammer. He felt his breath catch, his chest tightening as the weight of his decision to leave crushed him all at once. He had been so focused on building a better future that he had failed to see the present slipping away. The realization that his father might not survive this bout of illness filled him with a deep, gnawing regret. John sat down, the world around him blurring as Mr. Alvarez continued to speak. He heard words like emergency and hospital, but they barely registered. All John could think about was how he had abandoned his father in his greatest time of need. The success and wealth he had chased now seemed meaningless, mere shadows compared to the lost moments he could never reclaim. His thoughts spiraled as he recalled the nights he had avoided calling home, the missed opportunities to hear his father's voice, to offer comfort and companionship. The image of Henry lying frail and alone tormented him. How could he have thought that money could ever replace the time spent together, the shared laughter, the silent support during tough times? The realization struck with full force. He had traded priceless moments with his father for a dream that now felt hollow. The guilt and sorrow overwhelmed him, tears streaming down his face as he clutched the phone. He thanked Mr. Alvarez for the call, his voice breaking, and promised to return as quickly as he could. Hanging up, John felt a profound emptiness, a chasm of regret that no amount of success could fill. The flight back to New York couldn't come soon enough. Every second away from Henry now felt like a betrayal, a reminder of the precious time he had squandered in pursuit of something that no longer seemed important. The only thing that mattered was getting back to his father, to make amends and be there for him, no matter what the future held. He hurriedly packed a suitcase, booked the earliest flight to New York, and left behind the city that had both given him success and taken him away from Henry. The drive to the airport was a blur of urgency and guilt, his mind racing with thoughts of his father. As the plane took off, John gazed out the window, the sprawling city of Los Angeles shrinking beneath him. His thoughts drifted back to Henry and the sacrifices his father had made throughout the years. He remembered the late nights Henry spent working extra shifts to provide for them after his mother's death, the weekends they spent together in the carpentry shop, Henry patiently teaching him the trade, the countless small acts of love and support that had defined his upbringing. Tears welled up in John's eyes as he thought about the man who had always been his rock. Each memory was a poignant reminder of the bond they shared and the time he had wasted chasing material success. He recalled Henry's unwavering support, even when times were tough, and how he had always put John's needs before his own. The plane's hum and the quiet conversations around him faded into the background as John was consumed by his reflections. Regret gnawed at him as he acknowledged the distance he had allowed to grow between them. The job, the money, the new lifestyle. All of it seemed insignificant compared to the relationship he had neglected. John's thoughts turned to the present, to Henry lying ill and alone, and a fresh wave of determination surged through him. He vowed to make things right, to be there for his father in a way he hadn't been in months. The flight felt interminable, each minute stretching out painfully. John's mind oscillated between hope and fear, anticipation and dread. He tried to prepare himself for what lay ahead, knowing that Henry's condition might be worse than he imagined. Yet, amidst the anxiety, there was a glimmer of resolve. He would not waste another moment. He would give his father the love and care he deserved. As the plane descended into New York, John felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The city lights below brought back memories of his childhood, of a simpler time when the most important thing was family. He gripped the armrest, bracing himself for the emotional reunion. John knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. He had made his choice, and nothing mattered more than being there for Henry. John arrived at his childhood home, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. The familiar facade of the house stood unchanged, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. He pushed open the front door and was immediately struck by the quiet, almost eerie stillness. Taking a deep breath, he made his way to his father's bedroom. When John saw Henry, his heart shattered. Henry lay in bed, looking frilier than John had ever seen him. His once strong and sturdy frame was now gaunt, his skin pale and drawn. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, the beeping of medical equipment filling the room with a relentless reminder of his fragile state. John's eyes filled with tears as he approached the bed, feeling the full weight of the months they had been apart. "Dad," John whispered, his voice trembling. Henry's eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile spread across his face. Despite his condition, a glimmer of joy shone in his eyes at the sight of his son. With great effort, Henry raised a trembling hand, and John grasped it tightly, feeling the fragility and warmth of his father's touch. "John, you're here," Henry said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The simple words carried a depth of emotion that cut through John's heart. Overcome with guilt, relief, and love, John leaned over and wrapped his arms around his father, holding him gently yet firmly. For the first time in years, John allowed himself to cry in front of his father. Tears streamed down his face as he held Henry, the weight of his regrets pouring out in a torrent of sobs. Henry, though weak, raised a hand to stroke John's hair, offering comfort even in his frail state. "I'm so glad you're back, son," Henry murmured, his voice filled with a warmth that belied his physical weakness. "I've missed you so much." John pulled back slightly, looking into his father's eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for leaving." Henry shook his head gently. "You're here now, and that's all that matters." In that moment, the room was filled with a profound sense of peace. John and Henry, reunited at last, found solace in each other's presence. The physical and emotional distance that had separated them melted away, leaving only the unbreakable bond of father and son. John threw himself into the care of his father with unwavering dedication. Determined to make up for lost time, he spared no expense, hiring the best doctors and specialists to attend to Henry. The house soon became a hub of medical activity, with professionals coming and going, bringing the latest treatments and technologies in an effort to stabilize Henry's condition. John transformed their home into a place of healing. He purchased specialized equipment, converted a room into a comfortable and fully equipped care facility, and even brought in a physical therapist to help maintain what little strength Henry had left. Every day, John was by his father's side, ensuring he took his medications, assisting with exercises, and keeping him company. Despite his efforts, Henry's health continued to decline. The doctors did what they could, but the reality of his condition was unforgiving. Each day brought new challenges, and John found himself constantly battling a sense of helplessness. He watched as the vitality slowly drained from Henry's eyes, replaced by an ever-growing fatigue. John's heart ached with the realization that his return might have come too late. He had envisioned a scenario where he could nurse his father back to health, where their days would be filled with recovery and rekindled joy. Instead, he was faced with the harsh truth that some things couldn't be undone. The illness had taken its toll, and time, once lost, could not be regained. In quiet moments, John would sit by Henry's bed, holding his hand and sharing stories of his life in Los Angeles, hoping to bring some light into the dimming days. Henry listened with a gentle smile, his spirit warmed by his son's presence even as his body grew weaker. John cherished these moments, but they were tinged with the painful awareness that they were running out of time. John's frustration grew as he realized that no amount of money or effort could reverse the relentless progression of Henry's illness. He felt a profound sense of regret for every moment he had missed, every opportunity to be there for his father that he had let slip away. The burden of this regret weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the price of his ambitions. In the end, John understood that his love and presence were the most valuable gifts he could offer Henry in his final days. He devoted himself to making Henry as comfortable as possible, ensuring that his father felt loved and cherished. As the days passed, John came to terms with the reality of their situation, finding solace in the knowledge that, despite the lateness of his return, he was there now, giving Henry the care and companionship he deserved. As Henry's health reached its final stages, a poignant moment arrived that John would never forget. One quiet afternoon, as sunlight filtered softly through the bedroom window, Henry called John to his bedside with a weak but purposeful voice. John, sensing the gravity of the moment, sat down beside him, his heart heavy. Henry, with trembling hands, reached under his pillow and pulled out a small, weathered box and an envelope. He handed them to John, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and sadness. John took the box and the envelope, his fingers shaking slightly as he opened the letter first. The letter, written in Henry's familiar, neat handwriting, was filled with words of love and hope. Henry had written it months ago, knowing that his time was limited. In the letter, he expressed his deep pride in John, acknowledging the sacrifices both had made and the dreams they had shared. Then came the revelation that took John by surprise. Henry had bought a house in a small, picturesque town in the countryside. He described it as a peaceful place, surrounded by nature, where they could have lived together away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was a place where Henry had hoped to spend his final days with John, building new memories and finding solace in each other's company. The key to this house was inside the small box. With tears streaming down his face, John opened the box to find an old-fashioned key, its metal cool against his skin. The weight of the key felt symbolic, a tangible connection to the future his father had envisioned for them. Henry, his strength waning, smiled softly as he saw John's reaction. "I wanted us to have a place where we could start anew," Henry whispered, his voice barely audible. "A place just for us." John was overwhelmed with emotion. The thought of his father planning for a future together, even as his own health declined, was both heart-wrenching and beautiful. He clutched the key tightly, promising himself that he would honor Henry's wish. The house in the countryside would become a tribute to his father's enduring love and hope, a sanctuary where John could remember and cherish the man who had given him everything. After Henry's passing, John felt an overwhelming urge to visit the house his father had bought. With the key in hand, he drove to the small countryside town, a place so different from the urban chaos of New York and Los Angeles. The house stood on a quiet street, surrounded by trees and bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. It was charming, with a quaint porch and flower beds that hinted at the love and care Henry had envisioned for their future there. Unlocking the door, John stepped inside, and a wave of nostalgia washed over him. The interior was cozy, filled with furniture that seemed to have been chosen with great care. As he explored each room, he found traces of his father everywhere. Bookshelves lined with Henry's favorite novels, a workshop in the garage reminiscent of their carpentry days, and photographs of their family, carefully framed and displayed. In the study, John discovered a large wooden desk. Drawers were filled with papers, and it was there that he found a collection of letters, all addressed to him. These letters, written by Henry over the years, had never been sent. With trembling hands, John began to read them, each one a testament to his father's enduring love and hope. The letters spoke of everyday life, of Henry's thoughts and dreams, and most poignantly, of his unwavering belief that John would find his way back home. They chronicled the highs and lows, Henry's struggles with his illness, and his immense pride in John's achievements, even from afar. Some letters were filled with advice, others with simple musings about life, but all of them radiated a deep, unconditional love. As John read through the letters, tears streamed down his face. He felt as though he was having one last conversation with his father, each word bringing them closer despite the physical separation. The house, filled with these precious memories, became a sanctuary of their shared past and the dreams Henry had for their future. Among the letters, John found one that stood out. It was written shortly after Henry had bought the house, expressing his excitement and his vision for the life they would build together. Henry had imagined them gardening, fixing things around the house, and simply enjoying the peace and quiet of the countryside. Through these letters, John discovered the depth of Henry's sacrifice and the strength of his hope. The house was not just a physical space, but a symbol of the life Henry had dreamed of for them. It was a legacy of love, reminding John that no matter the distance or time apart, the bond between father and son remained unbroken. Touched by the depth of his father's love, John made a life-altering decision. The profound impact of Henry's letters and the realization of his father's unwavering hope inspired him to honor Henry's memory in the most meaningful way he could. John resolved to leave behind the fast-paced, materialistic life he had built in Los Angeles and embrace the simpler, more fulfilling life his father had envisioned. John began by selling his possessions in Los Angeles. The luxury apartment, the high-end car, and all the trappings of his previous success were put on the market. The process was both cathartic and emotional, a shedding of the superficial layers he had accumulated in his pursuit of wealth and status. Each item sold felt like a step closer to the life he now desired, one rooted in love, simplicity, and genuine connection. With the proceeds from the sales, John settled all his outstanding obligations and ensured he had enough to support his new lifestyle. He wanted to start afresh, unburdened by the excesses of his past. The move to the countryside was not just a physical relocation, but a symbolic return to what truly mattered: family, memories, and the values Henry had instilled in him. Arriving at the house that Henry had bought, John felt a deep sense of peace. The quiet, the natural surroundings, and the home itself were a stark contrast to the relentless noise and bustle of Los Angeles. He began to make the house his own, integrating his life into the space Henry had lovingly prepared. John's days became filled with activities that brought him closer to the essence of what his father had wanted. He took up gardening, something Henry had always enjoyed, and spent time restoring and maintaining the house. The simple, hands-on work was both therapeutic and grounding, allowing him to connect with his father's spirit in a tangible way. As John settled into this new life, he found that the memories of Henry became a source of strength rather than sorrow. The house was filled with reminders of his father, not just in the physical objects, but in the very atmosphere of love and care Henry had imbued it with. Living there, John felt a profound sense of fulfillment and purpose. This change marked a new chapter for John, one where he honored Henry's legacy not just in words, but in the very fabric of his daily life. He embraced the values of simplicity, love, and meaningful living, finding joy and contentment in the small, everyday moments that now defined his world. As John settled into his new life, a profound sense of purpose began to take shape. The love and care he had poured into the house, combined with the deep regret of not being there for Henry sooner, inspired him to channel his energy into something greater. He decided to transform the house into a sanctuary for elderly individuals who had been abandoned by their families, offering them the care and love that he wished he could have given to his father in those final days. The decision was not made lightly. John spent months planning, renovating, and preparing the house to accommodate his vision. He worked tirelessly, ensuring that every room was comfortable, welcoming, and filled with warmth. The garden Henry had loved became a peaceful retreat, a place for the residents to enjoy nature and find solace. Word of John's project spread through the small town, and soon, volunteers and donations began to flow in. The community rallied around him, inspired by his dedication and the noble cause he had embraced. Together, they created a nurturing environment where the elderly could live with dignity, surrounded by people who cared for them deeply. The home quickly filled with residents, each with their own story of loneliness and abandonment. John treated each one with the same kindness and respect he had for Henry, listening to their stories, sharing in their joys and sorrows, and ensuring they felt valued and loved. The house became a vibrant place of community and connection, a beacon of hope for those who had once felt forgotten. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, John would sit on the porch, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of Henry often, feeling his presence in the quiet moments and the love that permeated the home. The regrets that had once weighed so heavily on his heart began to lift, replaced by a sense of peace and fulfillment. John realized that the true meaning of wealth was not in material possessions or financial success, but in the richness of human connection and the time spent caring for others. He understood now that every moment of kindness, every act of love, was a treasure beyond measure. By dedicating his life to helping others, he found a profound sense of purpose and inner peace. The house, once a symbol of Henry's hope for a shared future, had become a legacy of love and compassion. Through his work, John honored his father's memory every day, providing the care and support that Henry had always believed in. Surrounded by the community he had built, John finally found the peace he had been searching for, knowing that he was making a difference in the lives of those who needed it most.